Episode title: Minion Soldier shares his mediocre game ideas. I'm sure some of you know which comment originated that. And it was funny. It was really, really good. But it does present a certain challenge. Well, what are your ideas? How would you do things? Who's to say that you're better? I think that, there's a lot of core decisions to how Star Citizen is built, how the game is just basically structured, that I fundamentally agree with. And that's, one of the important things to acknowledge. There's a reason why Star Citizen is where it's at. There's a reason why Star Citizen has brought in as much money as it has. And it's not just cool looking spaceships and all that, but it's when you hear guys like Tony Zurvek or Chris Roberts talk about video games, that they're right. At the very heart of the ideas that they present, they are correct. And for the longest time, I've been trying to kind of work my way around an idea of how to present all the critical places, where something like, let's say, World of Warcraft or, the Old Republic failed, but where Star Citizen is kind of primed to succeed. And, some of the changes that should be made to those games, but the core game principles have always been so different, obviously, that I'm just not sure of how I could kind of put the two together, but it's always been an episode I've always wanted to do, but I know it'll be a long one, and I'm just not sure about how to kind of make it all work together. It's somewhere in the back there, just kind of stewing away in a pot, trying to figure out if it's going to actually turn into something. But there's a lot of great ideas in Star Citizen. All you have to do is really just kind of take a walk around some of the spaceships, some of the space stations, and you get it. You totally get it. The problem is, and this is where I kind of fundamentally disagree, is with the execution. I feel that even listening to Chris Roberts talk with us when him and Sandy made their last appearance, and he was talking about one of the big problems which causes the servers to crash, as players go to new and different areas and they spread out, and all of a sudden the servers got to remember all these things and all those things. And eventually it just becomes a countdown until the server fails, because there is just so much in the Stanton system right now. And I understand why it's all there. And I understand that it's important to cause the game to crash, cause the servers to fail, because that way what's driving these errors. That's very important data to get. But at the same time, I feel that realistically, what we now call the persistent universe should actually be the PTU. And what we actually have as the persistent universe is actually far more limited. And what do I mean by that? But if you take the areas around, say, Crusader and Hurston, those two planets and their moons, I think that back when we were in the patches, when that was all that there was, the game was a lot more reliable. The game was performing a lot better, and there have been a number of performance improvements that have probably come into the game between now and then that really haven't been able to show themselves well, because there's the overlying problem of the servers just kind of, dying. And so you don't really kind of get to see these things. And there's a lot of problems that maybe get missed simply because, the servers aren't reliable. And another thing is that CIG needs a place where they can show off the potential of the game. And the players need a place where they can kind of enjoy the game and play the game, and where it's reliable. And I think that if you're saying that having so many areas and so many places to travel to is really what's kind of driving these server errors, then why don't we kind of keep this realm on the PTU, and for the PU, why don't we keep it a lot more limited? Give players an arena where they can actually play the game. give people a stable environment where an org can get 25 or 30 players together and all get onto the same server and maybe do hammerhead versus hammerhead, and have a reliable gameplay experience, and then be able to walk away from and say, what did we learn from that? How can we change our tactics? Or hammerhead versus this ship or versus that ship. And it's not always just a nightmare of going, well, I just got kicked off the server. Well, I just got kicked off the server. Okay, we'll try to get back to our server. Can't. It's full. Blah, 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 blah. I think that we just need a much more reliable environment where players can play the game, and where, people who maybe, they want to play Star Citizen, but they don't want to deal with all the bugs, a place for them to kind of enjoy, a much more stable and a much more, a much smoother experience, There's so many enthusiasts out there who I think that they would probably, them and their org, they would really kind of be really hyped up to be able to say, hey, we're going to start doing ops on Saturdays, and guess what? We can all get into the same server, and it's completely reliable. The missions work. You're not getting 30K'd. Go out and have fun. And if a smaller scaled version, it's not the right way to phrase it. If a cut down version of the Stanton system can provide us with that experience, then why don't we do that and just have that as the persistent universe and have the broader Stanton system as the PTU? And so you might say, well, yeah, but they need that crash data. They need to be able to have players, playing the latest version of the game so they know what causes it to kind of melt down. Well, there's a number of reasons, if they want to go to those other planets or they want to try out different things, they can go to that area. But also maybe we can make it so that whenever a new ship, kind of comes into the game, it hits the PTU for one patch cycle before it hits the persistent universe. So there's that reason to go in there and try out all the new ships. And we can even make it in the PTU so that you have access to all ships. It's like, normally when you get on the PTU, or at least sometimes when you have access to everything and you have unlimited money and you can just do whatever you want. You can buy different guns, you can try out different builds, and then you can come back to the persistent universe and, execute based off of that information. I mean, that would be the main point that I would differ on. That would be kind of the big one right now. I mean, there's a lot of little things having to do with ships and how this works and how that works and quantum and all of that, but I would be much more interested in making sure that there is a version of Star Citizen out there that is far more stable than the version that we have now. It's nice to have, all these extra planets and moons, but what do they really do? Not much. Everything that you really need to make a functional game loop is in around, those two planets and their moons. Maybe, I could be wrong. I mean, there could be so much more to this problem. And, obviously, having Chris sit down in front of everyone and explain it, he's going to, even Chris is going to abbreviate some information out of that. But that would be kind of where I would look. That would be kind of one of the big things, is trying to make sure that there's at least a version of this out there that is stable and enjoyable, so that when people kind of go and they buy their $45 or they buy their, $500 game package, or what was it? I saw a video come up in my feed that someone was interviewing a guy who spent over $100,000 on SC. It's a hell of a game package, but okay. Some place where they can kind of enjoy that, even though it's going to take a while. It's going to take a long time for things to get done. I feel that would be, that would be an interesting arena to create. And I think with something like that, You could also start to look at player behaviors around things like, going out and doing missions, earning reputations, earning rewards. Maybe every patch in the persistent universe, you could say, hey, you know what? This is, you do X amount of missions for this guy if you're a law-abiding player, X amount of missions for this guy if you're a criminal, and you get some cool unlock. Like some old World War II style nose art for your fighter in the future or even currently. Things like that. Different armors, different guns. Just give people a reason to kind of get in and enjoy and see what kind of rewards do they like, what don't they like, what missions do they generally gravitate to. If they're doing these missions but they're not doing those missions, why aren't they doing those missions? And it's not just because, as Tony Zurvek recently showed us, like, these are the times when all the missions just failed because they're broken. And it's just like, well, what if they worked? What if the servers supporting those missions worked? And then we could start to get some more reliable data and look at what missions tend to do best with players. And I'm not just talking about, credits per hour calculations, but what are most enjoyable to play, I mean, to a certain degree, I think it would just be healthier for everyone, even for CIG, because imagine, as Chris was pointing out, imagine being able to get onto a server and the NPCs weren't all T-posed and standing on top of chairs, but they were actually showing the behaviors that we've been hearing so much about, but that kind of don't work because the servers are dying. And so all the behaviors and all this work that we've been hearing about for years could actually manifest itself in a stable environment. There was a time a while ago when we were doing a whole bunch of talks about FPS missions, and it was just, it was frustrating because I was showing where I was just emptying clip after clip after clip into an NPC, and they weren't even reacting and they weren't dying either. I was like, what's going on here? Is it a server? Is it, obviously, but, is it the game? Is it the server? What's going on? I don't know. And, what if we could actually play, the Hurston bunker missions and the server was stable? And we could actually see what those NPCs, what their combat behavior is, instead of just like running around a corner and then they're like, oh, I'm going to get you. And they're drawing their gun over and over and over again. And they're looking at you and you're like, what is this guy doing? You just blast him in the head. And you're like, oh, wow, what a hard mission. There's a lot of valuable technical data that obviously comes from game crashes and us not having access, or us having access to all these wider things. But I think at the same time, the player experience data in a much more stable environment is equally as valuable, especially at this early stage. Because imagine you're looking to develop all these branches of content, but because none of them are really working in the game right now, you don't really know what is going to give you the most bang for your buck, which ideas are kind of stinkers and which ideas are kind of winners. But you don't really know because the players, they've technically had access to some of it, but it doesn't generally work, that would be the biggest difference, I think, in approaches. But of course, realistically, we're talking about an armchair game developer here. We're talking about someone who sits on the sidelines and comments on how things are being done, and so it should be taken with a grain of salt by any sensible person. But this would be my starting point. I could be entirely wrong. By all means, roast me if you wish. But this would be based off of my personality and my approach to things. Would be how I would go about it. I would damn well make sure that there is a stable environment that players can enjoy and that they can show to their friends. So when their friends say, hey, what about the Star Citizen thing? And then you show them a space station with a whole bunch of people T-posed on chairs. They're like, yeah, wow, that game's looking great. I would rather there be a smaller scale version of it that actually does work. Anyways, that's the show for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and thanks for watching. Oh, and just quickly before I go, just in case anybody asks, what I'm doing right now is of course I still have 5 crime stats, so I took my ship out to intermediate space in between planetary systems. You can see Crusader a little bit there in the background. And I'm basically just flying around and firing my weapons because I'm trying to see if I can get NPC police to spawn on top of my ship. There you can see Crusader just a little bit in the lower left, just under the gun barrels. Yeah, so I was just testing out the idea to see if they would spawn on top of me to give me an opportunity to basically kind of create a farming location where it'd be very difficult, if not impossible, to quantum to, where I could take a ship that perhaps in the future might actually be able to salvage. And, I was just kind of testing out that idea, but unfortunately they didn't spawn, but who knows? Maybe that's just the server.
Thank you for watching. So if you want to keep up with the latest and greatest in Staff Citizen and Squadron 42's development, please follow us on our social media channels. See you soon.